Okay. So I am live again, and what I'm gonna have to do is that I'm gonna have to try and share this. And okay, so let me see if I can share this screen here. I apologize. Yes, some people are here. Thank you. You found me. Thank you so much. Good evening. Hello. Hello. It's actually morning for me. Tomas, thank you for finding me. I appreciate it. I'm trying to find the link to this, and okay, there it goes. Okay, so let me put this link just in YouTube really quickly so I can let people know where I am. So I apologize for that. Give me 1 second and I'll get this going, and then we can start actually learning about the TOEFL reading. And let me know in the chat, where you're from and where you are right now. I'm actually in Japan. So it's it's the morning for me, 9:30 in the morning. And so where are you guys at? Where are you located? And let me know what you hope to learn today. What you're hoping to get out of this lesson together about the TOEFL reading. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff, so I'm really looking forward to kind of getting into it with you guys. Let's see here. So, and okay. Nice, good. Yeah, we're here from Paraguay. Good evening. Hello, hello. Al-Shabi from Yemen. Nice. Tomas is in Chile, and Mua is in Japan. Mua is in Japan. Carlos, El Salvador, thank you guys for coming. Juliana in the US, Maria in Cuba, and Saki in Indonesia, Enes in Brazil, and in Peru at 7:35 p.m. Russia, living in the US. Guys, thank you so much for coming. My computer screen is here, so I'm going to kind of go back and forth between the two. So thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. I know you probably have a lot of questions about the TOEFL reading. There is, the test is really long and really hard, and the TOEFL reading is the first part. And it could be a little challenging to start with the TOEFL reading because you have to do a lot of things. You have to read 700 words in a passage, and then you have to answer questions, and you only have 20 minutes. And so let me ask you, what's the most difficult thing about the TOEFL reading for you? Let me know, what's the most difficult thing about it? And hopefully we'll have time to talk about it today and get into more details. I have to fix something in my camera, and I hope I don't break anything. Let's see. Okay, hopefully that didn't hurt anything too badly. Okay. So let's see what's in the TOEFL reading. So good morning, sir. You're in Thailand. Juliana, love you too. Thank you. Celine's glad to be here. Said I couldn't make it twice. Okay. So let me get into the presentation here. And what we're going to do is that we're going to talk about a lot of things in the TOEFL reading today. So it's going to be a pretty in-depth lesson. We're going to go through a lot of stuff. There's a lot to talk about. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take. We're going to put this up on the YouTube channel as well. So if there are, if you can't stay till the end, or if you have any questions or anything like that, don't worry about it. It'll be up on the site as well for a little bit of time at least. And so let me see, just some people have some questions here. Some people are bad with typing, reading accurately. Time, yeah, so we're going to talk about managing your time a bit and how to do that better and how to feel more comfortable with the time. Okay, so we're going to get into all that stuff. Let me start just actually getting into the lesson. And please, during the lesson, ask questions in the chat. I'm in a room alone, so I feel very lonely here. So you putting questions in the chat actually is very helpful for me, and I know that, people are listening and thinking about this stuff. So, please go ahead and ask questions as we move forward in the lesson. It would be really helpful for me, actually, if you ask questions. It's actually a really nice thing. Um, so. Okay, so some people have some questions about summary questions. We'll get into all that. Um, okay, so a little about me really quickly. So my name's Josh. I studied the ESL in college, and I have 10 years of experience. I teach all the TOEFL sections. I like to make videos, write articles, and yeah, that kind of stuff. This is one of our students, Tanista. If you ever want, some practice questions, or you need a TOEFL teacher, or you need practice tests, or something like that, you can always visit tstprep.com. We have all that kind of stuff, and our students really like us, I hope. So yeah, check out tstprep.com if you're interested in more of that stuff. Okay, let me ask you, what do you think is the best way to improve your TOEFL reading score? So most students, if they need help with TOEFL reading, they need to improve their score, right? So they took the test and they didn't get as good of a score as they wanted to get. So then they go home and start practicing. And so what do you think is the best way to practice when you're at home? So I want to talk to you a lot today about, practicing at home and, doing that kind of stuff. So what do you think is the best way to practice at home? And I'm going to look in the chat later for some of your answers. There's a little bit of a delay, so I'll wait for a bit. But let me tell you what ETS says. So ETS is the company that makes the TOEFL, and they have, a bunch of books about the TOEFL, and they even give some advice on how to improve your reading. And this is what they say. The best way to improve reading skills is to read frequently and read many different types of texts in various subject areas. So, for example, science, social science, arts, business. So this is what they say. They say, read a lot of stuff. They say, read a lot of stuff and, read a lot of different stuff and you'll do better. So, that's not bad advice, to read a lot of stuff. I mean, reading a lot of stuff will definitely help you, but it's not so it's not so helpful for you studying at home. So when you're studying at home, you say, okay, great, I'm going to read a lot, and you start reading a lot, but it's not so helpful because you don't have a kind of, plan for improving. You need a plan for improving to help you get better at what you're reading. I mean, I could read all the books behind me, but that doesn't mean necessarily that I'm going to improve my TOEFL score. Right? So we need to improve our TOEFL score. That's the goal here. We want to find ways to improve our TOEFL reading score. So how are we going to do that? All right. So we're going to talk about three main areas in this little lecture here. We're going to start by talking about TOEFL vocabulary, and then we're going to move on to the TOEFL iBT reading in 5 minutes. So just a really quick outline of the TOEFL reading in case you don't know about it. And then three strategies to help you improve. Three TOEFL reading strategies to help you improve. And so, so now I'm just looking at the chat to see if anybody has any ideas like how to practice at home. So Angel recommends reading about academic topics. So just like ETS says, right? But we need some type of plan, right? We can't just read a bunch of academic books. We have to figure out a way to use those books to actually help you improve. I mean, reading is helpful, but you just need a little bit more of a strategy, a little bit more of a plan. That's the idea here. Betty asked me about how can I save time because the time is too short, time management. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, about how to manage your time. And I'll talk about that more as we go. And So one person, I can't pronounce the name, but they said read a lot about the same passage. So read the same passage again, and so that could be helpful for you if you read the same thing over and over and over again. It sounds boring. I don't want to read the same thing over and over again. It's actually pretty good advice, because reading the same thing over and over again is actually helpful. Because you can learn new things the second time you read it, the third time you read it. You can remember what you learned before. So repetition is a part of it. But yeah, that would be pretty boring to do. So we want to try to balance that out a bit. So we're going to start by talking about how to improve your vocabulary. How to improve your vocabulary for the TOEFL. A big part of the TOEFL reading is vocabulary. One thing students often come to me, they want to know like a secret tip, a secret trick, a secret thing that's going to help you kind of jump up your TOEFL reading score. There's some tricks, there's some tips, there's some, kind of little secrets here and there. But most of them are not the big thing that's going to jump your score. They might help you understand the test a little bit. But really the thing to keep in mind is that the TOEFL reading section is easy if you understand the passage and the questions. Now, you might be thinking like, okay, so what? That's not helpful. The idea here is that if you don't understand the vocabulary of what you're reading, then it's really hard to answer the questions correctly. No matter what strategy, no matter what tips and tricks, if you don't understand it, you can't answer the question. So we want to work on, some of you guys might need a little help in building your vocabulary. Now, I know time management is also an issue, and I'll talk about that as we keep going here. So let me ask you what you think about this question. At your current level of English, how much of a reading text should you understand? Should you understand 70%, 90%, or 98%? What do you think? How much of the text do you think you need to understand? So let me know in the chat what you think. I'm going to kind of spoil it for you and just give you the answer right now. But I'll show you what it looks like if you know 70%. It looks something like this. What if you know 90%? Looks something like this. What if you know 98%? It looks something like, or 95%, it looks something like this. Out of 100 words, you don't know 5 words, 95%. So as you can see, if you only understand 70% of the passage, it's almost impossible to understand it. So you really need to work when you're practicing at home. One thing I encourage students is to actually read things and watch things and listen to things that are kind of easy and kind of fun. I know that maybe nothing academic is easy or nothing academic is fun. I'm sure, that there's some people who might feel that way. There's not too much academic stuff I find easy or fun. And I'm a native speaker. So, I understand that this might be a challenge, especially for the TOEFL. But if you're doing TOEFL passages, you're practicing TOEFL passages, and it looks like, and let me go back to the other slide. If it looks like this, that you really don't understand a lot of what you're reading, you probably have to work on easier text. You probably have to practice with things that are a bit easier for you. A lot of times people, when they practice for the TOEFL, they think they have to do TOEFL stuff. And that's not necessarily true. Usually I say to kind of balance it, like do a little bit TOEFL stuff, a little bit of, things that are fun and enjoyable and not too painful and kind of easy. Even though the TOEFL is an academic text, it's also a test to judge your language. Do you know English well or not? And part of that is just, consuming a lot of English stuff and learning and growing. So one thing that might surprise you is that I don't always recommend TOEFL stuff for students. I actually often recommend using things that you like, TV shows, movies, YouTube channels, books that you like, things that are kind of easy and fun and enjoyable. But what do you think? Do you agree or disagree with me about this? I'm going to give you some ideas of how to do this, but let me check the chat, see what people think. Um, uh, okay, so Zulamita, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, said, my way to improve reading is to put difficult words in the translator, then repeat them, and finally read again the same paragraph. That's great. Uh, the one thing I would say is that for me, the biggest thing is that I remember the words that I learned. So if I like, look up a word in the dictionary, English, or I study Japanese, so if I'm studying Japanese or if I'm learning English, and I look up a word in a dictionary, it helps for about 10 minutes. and then I totally forget it until it comes up again, until I see it again in a reading and I'm thinking, oh, what's that word? I know that word. I saw it before. So you want to try to have something that you can actually remember the words. If that helps you remember, great, then do that. The biggest thing is that you want to try to remember the words. In regards to the question of 70, 90, or 98%, some people said 70, 90, and nobody said 98. Juliana asked, how can I build my vocabulary? So I'm going to talk about that right now. Medium says, we don't have much time to understand 90 or 98% of the reading. What we need to do, I think, is to scan quickly and focus on main ideas and main words. That's a great point, Medium, is that she's saying that, you don't have to understand everything. You just have to read quickly and to answer the questions quickly. But remember, to read quickly and answer the questions quickly, you have to understand what you're reading. So it doesn't matter if you read quickly but don't really understand what's going on, you can't really answer the questions. So it's kind of one and the same. It's connected. Okay, so let me go to the pro tip here. So this is answering Juliana's question, how to build my vocabulary. And so I'm going to recommend a couple websites as well to help you with this. But let me get into it. The first thing is to read a lot of easy and enjoyable text, or watch with subtitles, easy and enjoyable things, movies, TV shows, YouTube channels. This is one of the best ways to improve. Now, the reason is because it's fun. It's not painful. And so, if studying for the TOEFL feels painful, you probably don't want to do it, right? So you probably don't want to do it because it's like, you guys are busy. You have work, you have family, you have responsibilities, you have, things that you have to do. So studying for the TOEFL is a kind of like chore, something you have to do. And, if you're anything like me, things you have to do but don't want to do, you'll kind of put it to the end of the day, and then things come up and like, oh man, I don't have time to study for the TOEFL, or oh man, I don't have time to exercise. Too bad. So, these things that are a little uncomfortable, a little painful, are harder to do every day. So the first thing to build your vocabulary, so if you have to build your vocabulary, I would actually suggest minimizing the amount of TOEFL stuff you do and actually do more of reading and listening and watching things that you enjoy. A good website for this is LinkQ. They have a lot of practice for students who need to build their vocabulary. They have like a Chrome extension where you can, and I'll actually put in the chat the website LinkQ, linkq.com. They have a Chrome extension where you can go to a lot of different YouTube videos and a lot of different Netflix shows, and you could download the transcript of the show or of the YouTube channel, and then you can upload it onto LinkQ and study it. And the reason why that's helpful is because you can watch something and then you have the transcript. You can read and watch at the same time. One question I get from students is about translating. Is it okay to have like translated subtitles? And my advice is no. You want to just have subtitles in your target language, in this case, English, because if you have subtitles in your first language, let's say your first language is Japanese, if you have subtitles in your first language, you'll just read that and not worry too much about what else is going on. So it's not just watching things and enjoying it, but it's also, focusing on what you're watching, focusing on it deeply and the language, not just the story. Usually we watch things because we like the story and we just want to listen to the story, but you want to have you're like studying and enjoying at the same time. You need kind of both of them together. So you're watching, but you're focused. It's not like you're on the couch relaxing. You're focused on your computer or wherever you are, and you're trying to study what you're watching. And another site that I'm a part of is is Langdive. It's a new site. It's kind of not ready yet, to be honest, but the idea behind this site is that you can put any YouTube video there, and then you can look at the subtitles, and you could click on a word and you can look at the definition, you could see examples, you can hear the pronunciation. I'll put a link to that as well, is to Langdive. But like I said, it's kind of in the works right now, but it's free. You can check it out and see if you like it. But that's one way. You want to have resources that include text and storytelling. So, you're watching a video, you're watching a show, and it's like a story. So you see the word in context. You see how the word is used every day. You don't want to study a list of words. And I'll say that avoid studying a list of words. And the reason for I put it in the wrong place. Sorry. Let me put it in the chat here. Avoid studying. Let's see here. Avoid studying a list of words. And the reason for that is just because a list of words is not. You don't see how it's used in context, so it's hard to really understand how it's used. So you can have a list of words, like we have a TOEFL vocabulary list that we give to students that we think is helpful as a reference. So if you want to find if a word is important, but I wouldn't just study a list of words. All right. Now the second actually before that, let me just check. Okay, so there are comments to everybody such as medicine. Omar, I love your comment. Omar says, you're all gonna score 119. Mark my words. So yes, thank you, Omar. Nice positive comment there. Good. Everyone's gonna get a perfect score. Okay, so some people have questions about time management. I'll get to that. I'll get to time management. Let me finish this little spiel here. Okay. So the next pro tip is to use a flashcard app to help your memory. You probably hear teachers talk about flashcard apps all the time. It might not be for you. You might not like flashcards. That's fine. Anything that you can review what you've learned is the best approach, so that you study the vocabulary and then you can review it again. You can see the word again. Teachers recommend flashcards because they're designed to come back when you're gonna forget it. So there's some algorithm that knows okay, you're gonna forget this word in 2 days. So 2 days you open up your phone, you open up the app, and the word is back, and you have to define it. So that's why a lot of teachers recommend it, because it's pretty easy. You don't have to think so much. The words are just given to you. A lot of students don't like it because they're just not comfortable with it. It's just not a fun experience. Or, there might be a lot of reasons. And, let me know what you guys think. Do you like flashcard apps, or they're not for you? What I would suggest if you don't like flashcards is to have some type of way of reviewing. Either you write a story using a couple of the words that you learned, or you try to use the words in a conversation, or you have some type of way to track what you're learning and track what you're doing. Any way that you can track what you're learning is really the best way to do it. So reviewing is really helpful, and that's why teachers recommend flashcards. So when you use flashcards, they come back when you're about to forget. So this is a kind of chart that shows you kind of what they when the flashcards come back, 1 day later, 3 days later, 7 days later, and it improves your memory. But yeah, any type of review process. One website is Quizlet. They have a bunch of pre-made flashcards already. Um, the one thing I don't like about Quizlet is that you can make your own flashcards, and there's a lot of flashcards. There's a lot of stuff there. So you can download a TOEFL vocabulary flashcard deck on Quizlet, but I'd recommend making your own flashcards because they will help you remember more. Really up to you what you want to do. And again, the site LangDive as well has flashcards that you can check out. And so does LinkQ as well. LinkQ also has flashcards. Okay, so far we have read things that are easy and enjoyable. So that's the first thing, to build your vocabulary. So we're talking about building your vocabulary. Read things that are easy and enjoyable. Easy and enjoyable. Okay, number 2. Review what you learned, either with flashcards or any other type of process that you have. And the third thing is to count your words and have a goal. I don't know why I'm typing it in the chat. You can just see my screen, but I just realized that. But so the reason why I say have a goal is because you want to feel like you have like a target, something you're aiming for. You say, okay, I'm going to improve my vocabulary, but like, how do you know when that ends? How do you know when, okay, I've improved my vocabulary, now I can just focus on TOEFL? How do you know that? How do you know when that happens? So that's really hard to do. I'll give you some numbers that I found after doing a little bit of Googling. This is CEFR level. I don't know if you guys know about CEFR level or not. But so this is about how much active or passive vocabulary you have. Active vocabulary means that you can use it right now when you're speaking to somebody. Passive is like you can understand it when you hear it, but it'd be harder for you to use it. So that's active and passive. Anything that you can do to improve this word count. So this is another chart here that shows, I wonder, I probably shouldn't zoom in. I don't want to mess up anything. But like, if you want to score, like Omar said, a 119 for everybody, you're probably at a C2 level. And to have a C2, you probably need to know about 10,000 words. C1, you score between a 92 to a 116. And B2, you could expect to score between a 56 to a 91. So that's a big range. But your CEFR level does have an impact on your TOEFL score. So be aware of that. If you want to count your words, again, LangDive can help you count the words, and LinkQ can count your words as well. Okay, so how to build your vocabulary. Easy and enjoyable stuff. Have some type of review system like flashcards, and also count your words. Count your words and have a goal for how you're going to finish. Now, I'm going to talk about time management because I've gotten multiple questions in the chat about time management. I wasn't going to talk too much about it, but since everyone's asking me, I should talk about it. And then let me just see what any other questions we have here. Okay. Yeah, flashcards is a good idea. Yeah, I think so. I gave some ideas for the flashcards. LangDive and LinkQ are the best ones. Somebody asked a question about fill in the table. The fill in the table question is really rare. It's not so common, so I wouldn't worry too much about it for the most part. I mean, that's easy for me to say, but of course, it's harder for you. You'll worry about it. But yeah, fill in the table, I would say, is not so common, and I'd have to kind of talk about it a while, so I'm probably not going to get into it. Yeah, Mariam said, so Mariam gave some advice. Fill in the table questions are general ones, not specific examples. I would say that's true for the summary, but I don't know about fill in the table questions, because fill in the table usually asks you to differentiate between like two things. So for example, let's say the fill in the table questions ask you, what's the difference between, zebras and giraffes? They won't ask that, but zebras and giraffes. You'll have to give specific characteristics about zebras and about giraffes. I would say usually general statements are better for summary questions is good, but fill in the table is a little bit different because they usually give you two different topics, and you have to give details about each one. Okay, somebody asked a question about speaking. I'll have to talk about speaking another time. Yeah, and you could read nonfiction books. Okay, so let me talk about time management. Now, where to start? When you take the test, there are a lot of things that you're thinking about, and it's hard to kind of organize all your thoughts and ideas. So you have this reading passage, and actually let me keep going. I'm gonna get to it in like 2 minutes because it does tie into a part of that I'm gonna talk about in about a minute. So let me keep going, and then I'll talk about time management. Okay, TOEFL iBT reading in 5 minutes. Let me just quickly run down what you have to do. So once you feel like your vocabulary is done, you're ready to focus on the TOEFL, or you're doing both, which is totally natural, and you should do that. You have 3 passages that are 10 questions per passage, and you have 54 minutes in total. Now, some students will message me and say, hey, you said 3 passages, 54 minutes, but I had 4 passages and 72 minutes. That does happen, that you will get an extended version of the reading or listening where you have 1 extra passage. So I should say that more often. And that's the extended version here. 4 passage, 72 minutes in total. And okay, approximately 700 words per passage. So it's a pretty long reading passage. You have to read for a while. And these are the possible topics you could be asked about: anthropology, art history, astronomy, biology, education, environmental science, geology, history, literature, meteorology, psychology, sociology, zoology. So there's a lot of different topics that you could be asked about. It's pretty impossible to predict what you're going to be asked about. Maybe somebody wants to share, some topics that they have trouble with, or a topic that you had on the reading passage. This is an example from ETS. So there is a free TOEFL IBT test. If you just Google it, free TOEFL IBT test ETS, you'll find the example by ETS. You can do a practice that's actually their practice test. And this is what the test looks like. There's a timer that everybody's scared of, and next, show answer, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things. Some people ask, what if I don't know about the topic? What if they ask me about astronomy? They ask me about the stars, astronomy, and I don't know anything about astronomy. Well, according to ETS, the passages cover a variety of subjects. Don't worry if you're unfamiliar with the topic. All the information needed to answer the question is in the passage. So, so in theory, everything you need to answer the question is in the passage. This is not a test about astronomy or about literature. It's a test about, what you know. It's a test about what you know about English. And now, why do I say that? I say that because even if you don't know about the topic, you can still do well with the passage. I think after working with a lot of students that this is not entirely true. And just to give you an example, like I'm better when in like classes like history or literature. I'm not as great in science or medicine or anatomy, so those things I'm not so strong at. So when I see a passage that's about medicine or anatomy, I find it more difficult than I do for something about history. It's just because of my learning style. So I do think there is a little bit of luck, if you get an easy reading passage or not, or something you know about or not. But in theory, everything that you need to answer the questions should be there. Okay. These are the question types here. I'm I'm not going to talk about them actually because they're, you could talk about each one forever. I'm going to just talk about general strategy. But the one thing that I will say is that should I learn a strategy for each particular question type? So sometimes you'll meet teachers or you'll buy books that teach you like a strategy for inference questions, a strategy for summary questions, a strategy for vocabulary questions. And it's like a step-by-step strategy. Like first do this, second do this, third do this, fourth do this, fifth do this. And they do that for each question. In my opinion, strategy is helpful, but I wouldn't follow a step-by-step strategy for each question type because I think it'll drive you crazy. If there's one question type, like for example, summary or inference that you really struggle with, then maybe a step-by-step strategy is a good idea. But for the most part, I recommend students learn general strategies that they can apply to multiple questions. And I'll say that again. I recommend general strategies that you can apply to multiple question types. So you don't have to worry about following a step-by-step approach for each question type. I used to teach that way, and I found that students were focusing too much on the strategy and not on answering the question, which is the most important thing. You got to answer the question, right? So that's why I don't usually recommend a step-by-step strategy for each question type. And we're going to talk about the strategies right now, the general strategies. Okay, so let me just skip. I'm going to skip those here. Okay, so now let me finally get to time management, and these strategies tie into time management. The first thing is to skim the reading passage. So let me ask you, when you do a TOEFL reading, should you read the passage and then answer the questions? Or should you read the passage and answer the questions at the same time? Or should you do something else? Is there another strategy you have? Let me know in the chat and I'll check them out in a minute. But I'm going to tell you the answer that we usually recommend. And it's here, is to skim the reading passage. So if you've taken the test before, some people take the test and don't prepare much. And what they do is what they normally do, is that they read the passage and then start to answer the questions. And then they realize, oh my goodness, the time is running out and I'm not going to answer all the questions. Because you really don't have time to read the passage and answer the questions. You have to do both at the same time because you don't have the time to do it. You just don't. There's not enough time to read the passage and take your time and understand it and then answer the questions. You just don't have time. So you do have to do both. Like you have to kind of read and answer the questions at the same time. And so let's see here. Okay. So Elena says she reads all the passage and answers the questions. Let me know, do you have enough time to answer all the questions? I really wouldn't have enough time to answer all the questions if I read the passage first. And yeah, so Mariana said that she reads and answers the questions at the same time. So Mariam says she goes directly to the questions, and for her it works. Yeah, so everybody's different. That's one thing to keep in mind, is that you kind of want to experiment. You kind of want to test to see which style works best for you. And so if you skim the passage, it looks something like this. Don't worry about reading the text. It's really small. I just want you to focus on the yellow highlighted part, which is the first and last sentence of the introduction and the first sentence of each body paragraph. So those are the things that I usually recommend that students focus on. If they're going to, if you want to read the passage first. And so I wouldn't read the whole passage. I would just skim. I would, read the introduction, maybe the first sentence and the last sentence of the introduction paragraph, and the first sentence of each body to kind of get an idea of what this is about. Now, the reason for that is because what you're doing is you're actively reading. So what does that mean by actively reading? That you're getting a little bit of experience with the whole passage. You're getting an idea of where they're going with the passage. Like if you just see the title and it says, astronomy, They could go in a lot of different directions in the passage about astronomy. So you want to get an idea of where the passage is going. And just to give you an example of this, to show you when you don't have any experience with a reading and you have some experience with a reading. Let's say, for example, you read this little tidbit from Japanese history. It says, Daisendo Kofuin is a fine example of Kofuin period keyhole tomb that is said to be the grave of Emperor Nintoku. Now, if you don't know a lot about Japan or the Japanese language or Japanese names, this is really hard because there's a lot of vocabulary that you're just not familiar with. You have no experience with it. You don't know about the way that the language works, the Japanese language works. So it's a lot harder for you to understand this. Whereas if you have some experience, like if, I studied European history in high school, during the 17th and 18th century, King Louis XIV was the longest reigning monarch of a sovereign nation in European history. So you might not have taken a European history class. So a name like Louis, monarch, sovereign nation, these might be more difficult for you to understand because you're not familiar with it. My point here is that when you skim a passage, you just get a little bit familiar with it. You have a little bit of an idea of what's going on. And so you don't want to take too long with this. I would recommend 2 minutes, not that long at all, to skim, to get an idea, and then start answering the questions. And you don't have to do this. All this advice is just advice to help you. But that's what I usually recommend, is just to get an idea, you skim a little bit and get an idea of what you're going to read. And I'll read this. Skimming a passage should take you less than 2 minutes. Do it, read actively, and put yourself in a better position to answer all the questions. Yeah. So when you skim, it shouldn't take long. It should take less than 2 minutes. It will help you answer the questions, ideally. If you do this, if you practice this and you say, you know what, Josh, this doesn't work for me. I feel more confused. I don't know what the passage is about. Okay, then you don't have to do it. At least try. Try this out. See how it works for you. And yeah, let me know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Yeah, and by the way, if anybody ever has any questions, you can always reach out to us at contact@tstprep.com if you have questions about classes or teachers or about YouTube, about some things here. We're pretty good with the comments, so if you leave a comment, we almost always try to answer it. Let me see what's going on in the chat. Please interact in the chat. Again, it helps me feel less crazy to be in a room by myself here. First and last sentences and last paragraph, first sentences of each paragraph. Azam said, okay. Rajak, same, nice. Al says, I just read the question and find the answer in the passage. Good. Yep. And Daniela says, there are people that read the first and last sentence of each paragraph. Do you recommend it? Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar, is that you can read so this is, you're reading the first paragraph and last sentence of the first paragraph. The reason I do the first paragraph is because usually the last sentence is a kind of like main idea sentence, just like when you're doing writing. Usually when you write an introduction, you kind of give a general idea, and then the last sentence of your introduction is usually kind of like the main idea of the whole essay. It's the same for the reading. Yeah, so that's why the first paragraph, but yeah, I recommend that. That's fine. Saki says, I read the question and find the paragraph later. Okay, yeah. So, one thing to keep in mind about time management, by the way, this is really important. So pay attention to this. The questions go in sequential order. So sometimes students will say, how can I answer the questions if I don't read the passage? Or how can I answer a summary question if I don't read the passage? You guys probably know the answer. It sounds like you guys know a bit about TOEFL. But the idea is that the questions go in order. So the first questions will be about the first paragraph. as you go the second paragraph and third paragraph. And this is also to help you with finding the answer. So, and again, time management. If the question number 1 is here, the last sentence of the first paragraph, where do you think the answer for question number 2 is going to be? What do you guys think? It's going to be in paragraph 2, 3, 4, or 5. The next question will be somewhere around here in the beginning of paragraph 2. Most likely. Not always, but 95% of the time. So be aware of that the questions go in order so you can read and answer the questions at the same time. And that'll also help you find answers quickly. If question 1 is here, don't look for question 2 down here, right? Look for question 2 somewhere around here. The answer should be around there. Okay, so that's really important. And then about summary questions, when you get to question 10, when you get to that last question, the summary question, you will have read everything because you had to read everything to answer questions 1 to 9. Another thing about time management that I didn't include here. Don't skip questions. The reason for that is because when you skip a question, you have to go back to it later. And that kind of messes with your head and with time. So what I usually do is that I recommend students, they write on their piece of paper or on the board, the whiteboard, if you're taking the home edition of the test, the numbers of the questions. I'm gonna do it right now really quickly. So I don't know if you can see that my sloppy handwriting, but it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what I'll do is that if there's a question that's hard, if there's a question that after a minute, 2 minutes, I really don't know the answer, but I have to move on. I have to answer the rest of the questions. So in that situation, what I'll do is that I'll circle the question and I'll answer it. And if I have time, I'll go back to it later. So in this situation here, I see number 5. Okay, if I have time, I'm going to go back to this question later. And I might even do this. I might even put like A and B and that I cross those out. I might think, okay, I'm going to cross out A and B. It's either C or D. I'm not sure which one. And so I'm going to come back to this later. Sorry for my bad. I have terrible handwriting. Okay, so that's how I would handle, like, if you need more time to answer a question, but you just don't have time, answer it, write it down in your notes, move on. If you have time at the end, you can go back to try to answer that question. All right, so next thing. All right, this is going to be pretty long. I hope you guys are still with me. I hope you find it helpful. Let me know in the chat what you guys think. I still got a little bit of things to talk about, so this is going to be over an hour. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Is there anything that I can do, anything that you find helpful or anything that you would like me to go over before we finish up? But this is going to be like this is going to be a little time. Okay, so I should have thought about that before I made this. But here we go. So recognize paragraph structure. So this is the second thing. So we talked about Skim. The next thing is recognizing paragraph structure. What this means is that, okay, well, I'm going to talk about what it means right now. The first sentence, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and last sentence of a paragraph follow a structure. Now, if you know about writing, then you kind of know this stuff already. But basically, the idea here is that your first sentence of your paragraph is a kind of introduction. The second sentence makes it more specific. The third to sixth give more details and examples about the topic. And then the last sentence kind of sums things up. And the best way to kind of explain this is to give a really simple example. My childhood wasn't much different from others. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my childhood, right? The second sentence, I have to make it more specific. I grew up in Valley Stream, a suburb of New York City. Okay, so childhood, main idea, getting more specific. I grew up in Valley Stream. I'm going to explain what this has to do with TOEFL reading in a minute. The third to sixth sentence. My family would eat dinner together, go to church on Sundays, take road trips in the summer to meet distant relatives. The grades I received were average. I spent most of my time hanging out with friends, chasing girls, and playing sports. Okay, so that's giving more details about how I spent my time in Valley Stream, where I grew up. And then finally, things changed, however, when I moved away from home and started college. So I'm transitioning to the next paragraph where I'm going to talk about college. Now, this is the same thing as what you have to do or what's being written in the TOEFL reading. It's just more academic. It's a little more difficult. Now, this helps because if a statement sounds general, it's probably located in the beginning of the paragraph. If the statement contains specific details, it's probably located later in the paragraph. So I use this to kind of help me find answers faster and easier. So that's the goal here, is to find answers easier. Let's look at an example here. Here is the topic sentence, right? Very general. There has been much discussion over why altruistic behaviors exist. So this is about altruistic behaviors and why they exist. Let's make it more specific, the pink part. Do these behaviors lead to overall evolutionary advantages? Do they help altruistic individuals pass on its own genes? One explanation is for altruistic types behavior is found in the genetics of natural selection. So altruistic behavior, don't worry if you don't know what this means, I'm just using it as an example. Altruistic behavior is the general statement. Make it more specific and talking about natural selection and altruism. And then the middle part here gives specific examples, talks about Richard Dawkins and his book, The Selfish Gene, and so on and so on and so on. And then they sum it up with a transition. Selfish gene theory has been controversial over the years and is discussed among scientists in related fields. So the next paragraph will probably discuss, how scientists talk about this in related fields. So this is how it works in the reading, in the TOEFL reading. And this is another example here as well. This isn't 100% all the time, but this is generally how paragraphs are structured. And again, you probably know this from writing, but you might not have thought about it with what you read. But what you read should follow something pretty similar. And so how will paragraph structure help you eliminate answer choices? So how will it help you? Well, basically you can see here, altruistic behaviors are not exclusively witnessed in humans. So this is a more general statement here. Sorry, I'd zoom in, but I'm a little scared to zoom in and lose the picture. But this is a more general statement. So since this is more general, I'm going to look in the beginning of the paragraph for it. It might not be there, might be the wrong place, but it sounds pretty general to me. So that's where I would look. Another example, so this is pretty good for insert text questions especially. Though it was not Asia, he still recognized the opportunities and wanted to share what he had learned about this new land. So I know this is at least after the first sentence because it's saying he, like who's he? Well, it's a referent, they have to refer to somebody. And though is a contrast from what came before, so it's definitely after the first sentence somewhere. And it's probably a little bit deeper in the paragraph. Okay, so the idea is that if they're asking for something specific, it's probably later in the paragraph. Another example here. Another example here. What did transcendentalists do? Transcendentalists, it's in the first sentence here. A new intellectual movement known as transcendentalism began to grow in the Northeast. So I have to look here to see where transcendentalists are. Here they are. So it sounds, I want to give this example because it sounds general, but it's still in the middle of the paragraph. It's still right here. So that's another thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't work all the time. So I like giving tips and tricks and strategies and then telling people it doesn't work all the time because I want you to understand that it's just a strategy. It's just a tip and trick. It's not something that works 100% all the time. It's just something that I hope you guys find helpful. Uh, so that's the second one, to know the paragraph structure. I'm going to get into one more, but I want to check the chat, see what people are saying. Um, Ali says, sometimes when I think too deeply about the question, I end up choosing the more complex choice, but the actual answer is the more basic choice. Yeah. Yeah, that happens. So sometimes you can overthink the question too much and too deeply. So you want to be careful with that, and you don't want to do that, of course. Um, when you're doing it, you have to kind of trust your instincts a bit. Like after you think about it for a while, okay, this is the best I can do. I think it's correct, but I got to move on. I got to go to something else. Okay, so that's totally fine. Okay, but what do you recommend for people who get nervous? So, okay, Danielle asked a question. What for people who get nervous? One thing is that, and this happens for TOEFL speaking a lot. People get really nervous. Your nerves never go away. So that's the bad news, is that, you will always be nervous. I don't have like a magic pill, unless you go to a pharmacy and get a pill. But I don't have a magic pill to make you not nervous. But what I will say is that, it's natural to feel nervous because you're doing something important, and it's scary. You don't know what's going to happen. So this is very natural. The one thing that is in your control is your preparation. So if you prepare and you feel like you did as much as you could, you're busy, you have work, you have family, you studied as much as you could, you practiced as much as you could, you watched YouTube live videos of TOEFL, even though you could be doing a million other things, but you're here. I mean, that's amazing. So you should really be proud of yourself for doing that, and focus on what's in your control, is like what you study and how you prepare. So when you go to take the test, you're like, okay, I'm nervous, but you know what? I did everything I could. So I'm going to just do my best because I did everything I could, and I feel ready, and that's all I can control. And that's what I would recommend for feeling nervous, is just preparing and feeling like you did all you could. That's the biggest thing. All right. So, I'm going to go to the next one, but shout out to Miriam. She told me recently that she got her writing score. Again, check out TST Prep. We have teachers who help with writing and speaking and reading and listening and all that kind of stuff, and also practice tests. So tstprep.com. Wanted to give a shout out there. Now, let me go to the third reading strategy, is to increase your speed with keywords. So you guys might have heard of keywords. Let me know in the chat. Have you heard of keywords? Do you know about them? Do you use them? Let me know in the chat. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so here, what are keywords? Keywords provide the most valuable information in a given statement. They usually consist of nouns, verbs, and adjectives. So what does that mean? It basically means that the most important words for you to focus on when you're answering the questions are nouns and verbs. So in this example, the cat is in the house. Cat and house are the most important words for you to focus on. So you want to use keywords because they'll help you read faster, find information faster, trigger active reading strategies, and you become a more efficient test taker. So that's my little sales pitch for keywords, is that it'll help you be more efficient and go faster and just find the answers easier. So a couple things to learn about keywords. The first thing is that keywords are not function words. So they are not words like prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs, modals, conjunctions, pronouns, demonstratives. So when you're reading a question, so this is why this is helpful. When you're reading a question, you want to focus on the content words, like game theorist here, discovered. Any of this extra stuff, have, about, in, they could help you, understanding the question, but really you want to focus on the keywords because there's so much text to read and so much text to focus on that you really want to try to narrow your focus on just the most important things. So the other thing is that keywords are usually content words. So they're usually nouns, adjectives, adverbs, and the main verb. So here I highlighted them. So game theorists discovered altruistic behaviors animals. So those, I just focus on those words and they will help me answer the question faster. Keywords do not include typical TOEFL question wording. So then we get rid of the what and all that kind of stuff. And then we just have Columbus here, solar systems, earliest history. So, you know, you might, this is kind of extreme. You don't have to go this far. But the general idea is that instead of focusing on all this text here, you can focus on just a few words to kind of help you find the answers faster. That's the idea with keywords. They're just a little tool to help you find the words faster, find the answers faster, because you need to manage your time, as we've talked about already, and part of that is finding the answers, and keywords are a big part of that. And you know, sometimes you could cut a lot of words out and all you have to do, okay, I got to find Columbus somewhere, and there he is right in the first sentence. So again, finding the answers is kind of hard. There's a lot of text. We want to try to make it as short as possible. One way is to focus on keywords. Okay. So what do you think is the best way to improve your TOEFL reading score? So I just talked about this long, lecture about, studying vocabulary. We talked about these three strategies. So let me go back really quickly. So for the vocabulary, we talked about using easy and enjoyable materials, setting up flashcards, and counting your words to have a goal. When we talked about the strategy for the TOEFL reading, we just talked about, what did we just talk about? Let me find the slide here. Here we go. You skim the reading patches, you recognize paragraph structure, and you increase speed with keywords. So those are the actual I wanted to give you a mix of like how to practice at home with vocabulary and also some really good strategies to help increase your speed. Let me know if there's anything I missed in the comments below. This is coming down to a close. I'm going to check the chat just to see if there's any last questions here before I go. Somebody is going to start a group in WhatsApp, so guys, check out WhatsApp. Maybe you'll find something there. So Betty said, I always feel nervous about taking tests, especially reading tests. Yeah, I mean, like I said already, the only thing you can control is your preparation. So just focus on your preparation. Okay, with the questions about identifying main idea of the reading passage. Can you give us some tips for this one? Okay, so most of the time they don't ask you about the main idea of the reading passage except in summary. I have once in a while seen like, what's the main idea of the paragraph? This is kind of a random question that is not in books as far as I know, but sometimes it's on the test. I would probably use the same strategy that I would use for the summary questions to answer the main idea for the paragraph, or the strategy for answering the gist of a listening passage as well. Okay, so somebody asked a question about focusing. Bhagya says, I find it very hard to focus in the reading section with all the loud noises. Well, I don't know why there's so many loud noises. The home edition should be just in your house, or the test center. You should maybe find a different test center. Loud noises are out of your control. If you're going to take the test in a place that's loud, you should probably practice in a place that's loud. I know with COVID, it's different. It's harder to get out to cafes and stuff like that. But, either do it at your house with the TV on or something. Practice in a way that is loud to help you kind of improve your focus so you can get used to it. Okay, Karen, hey, how are you? Good to see you. Karen, we met last week. And so sometimes Daniela asked a question about sometimes there's a question that relates to two paragraphs 5 and 6. What can you say about these questions in specific, like tips? I don't have anything to say in particular because that question type is pretty rare. I've never seen it. Maybe once in a while it comes up on a test. I would say that if you needed to look at multiple paragraphs to find an answer, um, you have to kind of go through each of them and go through a process of elimination. So, okay, the answer is not A, it's not B, it's either C or D. I think it's C. And that's for all the questions, really. So that's not a really secret tip or anything like that. But if they ask you about the main idea of a paragraph or two paragraphs, you have to read both of the paragraphs. So it's kind of like bad luck if you get that type of question, because you have to read everything and you have to eliminate each choice, and it'll take time. So that's one thing. There's no really big secret tip for that. Do you recommend doing an exam before the day of the test? This is a great question. No. Well, yes and no. So I recommend that you take a practice test the week of the test. I recommend doing a practice test that you've already done before. So if you do a new practice test the day before the test and you do badly, it's gonna really hurt your confidence. So do a practice test that you've actually done before, so you can remember everything you've learned, and also you'll probably get a good score, and so it'll help motivate you a bit. And let me, you know what? I just realized I should change my screen here. Okay. Let me see here. Okay, that's that. Okay, day before exam is a tough day. Yeah, so I wouldn't try to do anything new the day before the exam. Yeah, just review what you've done already. Okay, some of the questions so some people are gonna go to WhatsApp. All right, that's it. I'm gonna start doing these live lessons every week, actually, because I kind of like doing them. I hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope you found it helpful and useful. Again, visit tstprep.com. We have all this good stuff, and that's it, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your time, and let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover. Next time, I'll be doing mostly speaking and writing workshops where we look at students' speaking samples and writing samples and kind of go over them together. So that's what I'll be doing most of the time with these live lessons. So, yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.